Okay, hey everybody out there, how you doing today? This is Nolan with PostProduction.com, and it is definitely my honor and pleasure here. We have Brian San Marco in on this conversation here. We're going to be talking about RX4, and for those of you who don't know Brian, he's been an audio engineer. He has more than 17 years experience. He's been working in post-production sound, film, television, music, doing all kinds of recording, mixing, mastering, restoration. He's just been doing a ton of work. In fact, some of the work you've definitely seen or heard, I should say. He did the restoration on the original Steamboat Willie, Mickey Mouse, and worked on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So definitely somebody that you're going to want to hear from, and we're super excited to have him here on the show. And like I said, he also does some music too, and he was showing me a little bit of his artwork here in the pre-conversation, and if we ask him nicely, he may show us some of that artwork that he says he authentically did himself. So with that said, I'm going to bring you into the call here, Brian, and let's see, there you go. Brian, can you hear us all right?
I hear you. Hi, how you doing?
Doing fantastic. Thank you. In fact, actually, you know what, Brian, real quick, let me do this. I'm going to remind the folks out there who we are and what we do. But we are PostProduction.com. And let me just cue this up here. There we go. And basically, PostProduction.com, for those of you who may not know, we're a resource and a directory for everything that has to do with post-production. And I'm just going to show the screen there. There we go. So we have a resource and a directory for everything that has to do with post-production. And the reason I'm bringing this up for all of you out there is if you've not gotten your free listing yet on PostProduction.com, absolutely do it. It's a worldwide directory. So that's our shameless plug there. Get your free listing if you've not done so already. And then you can become part of the directory listing right here so people can find you for what it is that you do. So with that said, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you, and Brian is going to tell some pretty unbelievable stuff and update us about what's happened with Izotope and RX4. So Brian, welcome to the show, and what you got for us?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here, and I have the new version of RX4. The new version of RX, which is RX4, on my computer. I've been beta testing for them for the last few months, and I'm excited that they've just released it. And it's a game changer in terms of sound restoration and just repair, because you could restore, but a lot of people use it for simple repairs, and it's become much more fluid to use compared to previous versions, and it's pretty awesome. I've been doing spectral repair since the beginning of time, or at least since the beginning of spectral repair, not only with Izotope, but as a result, I pretty well functioned at using the spectral repair window, and as I'll show you in a minute. But basically, RX4 is an amazing tool. Excuse me while I navigate Windows. You see my eyes flitter one way or the other. It's pretty amazing. If those of you familiar with RX have seen probably versions 1, 2, 3. One was kind of a clunky tool that was like a brand new thing. It's kind of like having a brand new car technology on the market. It was fun, but it didn't work really well. 2 got one working. 3 streamlined the entire program, and now we're at 4, which is again changed the entire game. And I'm going to show you some things here that are just really cool things that they've done with 4 that I think are going to be useful to just about everybody in audio, let alone audio post-production, where those kind of fixes are really important. So I'm going to switch you over to my Pro Tools screen here, where I have an old restoration title I did called The Visitor from sometime in the mid-'70s, I think it was, for one of my clients. And what we see here is I have a top track that's my video guide. I have my middle track, which is my raw, and the bottom one, which is a processed in progress version. I'm going to use this yellow one because it's going to really emphasize what I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to zoom in on Pro Tools here, and you'll see down below it I have this new module from RX called RX Connect. Now what this does is it replaces the old spectral repair plugin. So no longer do we have a spectral repair plugin like this as we did in RX1, 2, and 3. We now have this RX Connect. The reason why this is cool is because it allows me to run RX and Pro Tools simultaneously, which means that when I'm making a fix, I'm going to highlight a section on this yellow one. Let's listen. Can you hear that all right, Nolan?
Yeah, I got the crackle there for sure.
Okay, so you hear the big old scratch anyways. I'll turn up the volume a little bit on my end. So you have that big scratch there, whereas before I would have to highlight it and capture it within the RX3 window, and it would give me this window, and I would have to come down here and audition, and I would make my fix and have to hit this mouse button. And anyone who works in the business knows hitting mouse buttons is a big waste of time. So what we asked for in RX4 was a way to incorporate not just the spectral repair, but all the different things that it does in one window in one fell swoop. So what they developed was this RX Connect. So now what I do is I take my section and I highlight it, and I hit my send button, and this is going to send it to RX, the standalone application, which I will bring you to. So you can now then see the waveform in RX itself.
And now, mind you, Brian, that's your artwork in the background there that we're looking at.
Oh yeah, let's real quick.
Check that.
I have to show. I was showing Nolan my my camera's all backwards, so I'm trying to figure out how it works. My little paper mache eraser top tissue paper artwork here. My fish right above, all the way above it. Go straight up. There you go. And you know, it's stuff I'm proud of. It's all for sale. If anyone wants to bid, just email me. I'm happy to talk to the highest bidder. But you know, don't sell me short. It's worth at least a couple of thousand per thing. Oh, the base isn't for sale. I'm keeping that one.
Okay. Sorry, I had to take a cheap shot at you, Brian.
That's okay. I don't mind taking credit for my son's artwork. Okay, so here we're back in RX4. Now I just sent it to RX4, so now instead of having to be stuck in the plugin and hit mouse buttons, now I'm in the standalone, and you'll see that as a result I've got full functionality of all the tools within RX, which include quick keys. So I'm not doing anything with this mouse. I'm not moving my mouse back and forth. I'm literally using my keyboard to make fixes. So
this is a picture of the sound, is that right?
So this is a picture of the sound. Real quickly, for anyone not familiar, what the picture represents is, I mean, I've done this for a long time, so I'm pretty clear on what I'm seeing. For most people, they find it intimidating at first. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you understand what you're seeing, it's fairly easy. So what we're seeing here is, it's just like in a light graph where you have ultraviolet to infrared. Ultraviolet, as you see up here where there's nothing, is the quiet spots. It actually fades to black here. As you can see, it's very dark. And then infrared, the closer your brighter red you get, the louder it is. So this is the loud spot in this whole page, which you can pretty much hear how it's just poking out. And you can see how loud it is compared to this part, which is the lady's voice. This is the harmonics of the lady's voice. These little long lines are other pops in between, which we're kind of hard to notice when they're amongst this big one. So with the picture, with our RX, you could literally remove things within time and frequency. So I have a frequency scale along the vertical and then a time scale along the horizontal. And so I could literally take any shape I want. And by the way, RX has other cool tools like lassos. You can make all kinds of wacky shapes, which I don't use as a professional for many reasons, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But we have paint brushes where we could choose big long sections, but I generally stick to the rectangle tool and the vertical tool, which captures everything. So I use this one, which will capture everything in time, or this one, which is going to capture things as I see fit in time and frequency. Now for this pop, I'm going to grab just about everything, because you can see it gets all the way up here and goes all the way low. So let's choose the tool that's going to grab everything. Open up my spectral repair module here. Now within the spectral repair, we have a bunch of different options too, which I can get into a little bit later. For the most part, though, once you learn how these function, you'll find using this window much easier. So I have it. I'm going to put this on replace because I want to get rid of that sound. Then I'm going to process it. I have a quick key for it, so I'm not going to hit the mouse button, but you can hit the process button down here. and you can hear that big snap is gone. Now, again, unlike being in Pro Tools doing the plugin, here now I can audition things, and oh, what's that other pop? I hear another pop there. So instead of going back right away, I'm going to remove this other pop.
So Brian, before you would have to be bouncing back and forth.
To just to audition, you'd have to bounce back and forth.
But
and
here
then,
now in one application, you can just take a look, remove something, audition it, and then maybe find something else, and repeat the process.
That's correct. And more than that, you guys saw me take a small portion of that section. I could literally take the whole track if I want and bring it into RX that way if I choose. I may not choose to do it that way, but if you have a large section that's maybe 20 seconds long or a minute long with a lot of crackles and pops, it's easier to move the whole thing, make all your fixes, and then move it all back versus before where you had to wait for the RX plugins, which are infinitely slower than the standalone program itself. So it's an okay fix. I'm not real happy with what I did there, so I'm going to actually redo this big one because I'm finicky, and that's part of the game. What you'll find is, and this is what's really discouraging to people starting off, is that they find it hard and frustrating because they're not getting the results they want. What I tell people is practice is everything. So you practice at it. You can see it looks funky there. I've created a hole by removing the pop, but with a different setting, I can replace that hole. So a lot of it is not just doing one fail shebang and there you go. It's literally about I'm going back here because I don't like what I've done. It's literally trying to match the background. You can see how this is all very noisy, but in between you see this kind of mosaic blue, and that's what this should be. So if it looks strange, it's probably going to sound strange, which again is really good to have the visual tools, and once you understand the visual tools, you'll be able to sort of use them a lot more efficiently. So I have this other pop here, which I'm going to remove. Now there's generally, you'll notice that I'm doing a lot of different things at a time. I'm not just making one repair. There's nothing that will you can't do one repair for most things. A lot of times people go in, they think they could just like hit a button and it's going to make everything better. You'll see that a lot of times when I'm working, I will make a repair to remove something and then I'll make another repair to smoothen it out, or like say in this case where there's another pop here, a little bit of static, I find that certain settings here work better for high frequencies, like the pattern where I'm in that blue mosaic is going to work better than if I'm in the low here, which I'm going to use a replace for. So a lot of things take a couple of moves. Now I see a little bit of things I induced here, like this line doesn't look natural, so I could actually go back and redo it again. And of course, like with anything digital, the most amazing thing is the ability to undo.
Right.
So practice. So in a nutshell, the other thing that this Connect allows me to do, which is another cool thing about RX4, is that I have all these other modules to my right. So I have my D-Click module, which I can make my settings, and then within that same window, before I even get back to Pro Tools, now I've bounced out of Pro Tools, I'm still in RX, I can then highlight my sections. I could do a decrackle to get out some of the global crackles. You saw some things disappear there. There's some other big things here. Still using Spectral Repair along with decrackle now. That didn't work too well. Yeah, and like I said, it's like...
So, Brian, can you use multiple things at the same time? That's what you're doing, huh?
And that's exactly what I'm doing, and that's all because I'm now in RX standalone. I'm not in Pro Tools. And let's send it back. So I've removed that big pop. There's little things in there, but we can hit this button on top that says send back. The quick key is Command Return, which again, quick keys are everything when you're trying to work for a living. So I'm going to send it back to Pro Tools. Let's go back to hi everyone again. Let's go back to Pro Tools here. And now I'm back in Pro Tools, and now with the Connect module, I hit Render, which is going to literally write my section back, and you saw the thing disappear here. So now this is what I have.
Can you show us what it looked like before? And then
yeah, sure. Here's before,
wow.
And here's after. Now, again, before with RX3, I would have my declicker plugin. Here's my declicker. I forgot to turn off my target button here. So my declicker, I would have to declick it here. Go pretty hardcore on this. And then if I wanted to then do a spectral repair, go back into this, and like I said, all the limitations of the spectral repair itself,
Right.
go here and then do all that stuff. This is the RX4 one, but the declicker hasn't changed, so it pretty much looks the same. But you can see the difference versus before, where sending this whole thing into the RX standalone, and it's much quicker. The other cool things, mostly they've enhanced everything. Everything functions a lot better. You know, for those people who are on computers all day long, like within Pro Tools, you could tell when things are slowing your functionality down. Things are kind of jittery. Well, it's infinitely better than RX3, and RX3 was like way infinitely better than 2 or 1 were as far as stability goes. So let me redo that. So basically, so now I've got this repaired section I did in RX, now all of my Pro Tools. So I make my fades. I have to adjust bounds because I have the handles turned off, which is a different kind of Pro Tools lesson. So I make my fades and I'm good to go. Now I can move down the section like I was saying before. Now this whole section is just a nightmare. See, there's some footsteps there. Now I'm again watching the video here. You can't see it, but so let's take that section. Now, if I were to just take this and decrackle it with my declicker, what's going to happen is you'll see those footsteps disappear, which is, of course, you don't want to remove stuff that's supposed to be there.
Right.
Now, before, this is what I would have to do, and I would look at this and go, wait a second, there's someone walking, and I'd go back into the raw and literally recut and put them back.
Sure.
Well, now I don't have to do that because now I could take this whole section, send it to RX.
Right.
Let me switch back one more time. And now I have this whole big section in RX, which, by the way, the plugin spectral repair was limited to, I think, 5 seconds. This section itself is already 18 seconds.
Is there any limit that you're aware of now?
No, there's not, except that the longer I go, sometimes it takes longer to render. I have experienced some crashing. This version of RX4 that I'm using is still a beta, and I think there's one newer version since that I haven't yet installed. So a lot of that has been remedied because people have talked about it in the user groups about the things that they do, and that's one of the things, sort of the stability of the program with larger files. So that shouldn't be a problem for anyone who purchases it. It should be a non-existent issue at this point. But that said, everything crashes from time to time. That's kind of the nature of digital world and high resolution files. So there's my footstep, and it sounds very much like a footstep. So now I could literally, again, I'm in RX now because I use the Connect. I could take this section, apply my decrackle. Let's make those settings a little bit higher. And so I'm going around my footstep. We'll see some things disappear there. So there goes the crackle, my footstep. There's another footstep, and I have crackle between, so I don't need to worry about taking the whole section. I can now take this section, use my decrackle within that, see if that works. Looks like it worked fairly good. Little bits left over, so I'm going to do a little spectral repair to get a little bit of the residual out. There's a tick after. I hear that's a high frequency tick, so I'm going to go up here. By the way, I also have this cool color thing where you can adjust the resolution, which is all relative. So if I'm in a quieter section, I may want to look at it with a little bit softer light, or if I want to bring out a pop that I know I hear, but I can't quite see it, I could do this and bring out make everything look louder, basically. Now, of course, this doesn't help because you can see how much noise is in between this track. So there's a little tick after this. So I'm just going to choose an area where I hear it. Again, I know it's high frequency based on what I'm hearing. I'm just going to highlight the area, do a decrackle or a declick, and now it's gone. So then I send it back to Pro Tools. Well, I'm waiting for Google Plus to make this screen share a little bit easier. That's going to be awesome. So I send it back to Pro Tools, I hit my render, and you can see the difference there, just visually between the two, just by doing a decrackle. And I've preserved my footsteps, I've removed the crackle. Now, I didn't there's stuff I missed, but for demonstration purposes, That's after, and here's the before. So it's amazing. So now, in a lot of the work I do now, which is pure mastering, what a budget's a big concern. So I might have a lot. I'll have a lot less time for things, and having that RX4 Connect is a huge no-brainer as far as saving time and energy and really a lot of money, because you're talking the difference between having to bounce programs, quit one application for another, which is minutes, but it all adds up into hours at the end of it all when
Oh,
all is said
sure.
and done.
Sure. So you'd say that on and the piece that you were working on there, that was a restoration of like a film that somebody actually sent to you. It's what, an hour 18-ish or so?
The movie itself is about an hour 40.
Okay, so you would go through that and so what you're saying is that with RX4 you're able to go through and do a lot of that restoration and probably do you even have like an estimate of how much time it saves you on a project of that length?
Well, for that project particularly, I would actually do it a little differently. There's actually two questions there, because when you're on a limited budget and I'm doing, say, a conform with fixes, a lot of times I'll use the RX Connect because I want to stay in Pro Tools where I'm doing my conform,
Right.
and make sure that I'm doing what needs to be done or not taking anything out. I don't have time to go back to a different program. When I'm doing a restoration, like here, I'm going to go back to Pro Tools 1 second here.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm doing a restoration in Pro Tools, typically what I'll do, because I'm given a budget, a larger budget, which gives me time to do the conform. Let me close some of this stuff so we can see what I have going on here. I have a big budget, so what I'm going to do is start with my guide. I'm going to take my raw track, which is here. I'm going to take that raw track, open it up in RX, do some background processes, which is basically dehumming, getting out low-end frequency noise that just tends to cause problems. Any type of low-end global stuff, global decrackle, I'll use a light setting, and that result will give me this purple track. So I essentially have two tracks that I'm using to make a composite with.
Mm-hmm.
When I've got, this is on a full restoration budget. So typically I'll open up this entire raw track within RX. I'll work with it all in there. Anything I'm questionable about, like those footsteps we heard, I'm not going to touch. I'm going to be err on the side of caution. But I'm going to remove most of the stuff without looking at video. Then I come back into Pro Tools and I have these two tracks, and then I make my conform, whereby I basically group these two tracks, and do my conform, which is what most of these edits are reconforms, and basically do my conform, and then at that point I take this background track, I'll consolidate that and go back to RX and do a real-time pop removal. So I'm still using one program isolated from the other program when I'm doing a real restoration, but the time it saves, here's where it saves me time. Back in the day when I used to use Sonic Solutions, this was a long time ago, and ultimately their tools were great. They had no noise, and a lot of people who do this are very familiar, and they worked really well for at the time, but the problem is that their processes tended to take a long time. So if I want to do a background pass, a decrackle, that would take literally 16 hours to do, say, 10 reels, an hour 40 worth of material, hour 50. Now, within RX, I could set up background processes that literally take, at most, 10 minutes. So
Wow.
think of the time there. Now, we used to run these background passes overnight, but at times we couldn't decide when we were going to run them. So
Right.
it might eat up our whole day where we're sitting there doing nothing, literally, because it takes the whole computer processor to do these processes. Now with RX, I could do it all in the background, be working on something else, and it's going to do it in under 20 minutes for a whole stack of plugin modules that would have taken literally 2 days with past programs like Sonic Solutions. I used to use a thing called CubeTech, which is developed by some gentlemen in Germany for Steinberg. So they had it hooked up to Nuendo and Wavelab, which are things that Steinberg develops, and they worked kind of the same way, where I would have to. The workflow was where like I was showing you before, where's my mouse? I lost my mouse. There we go. Where I was where I would have to literally, when I wanted to fix something, make a regional capture. Let me choose one track here. I would bounce this as a sound file, and then have to go back, close Pro Tools, go back into RX, and open it up again, make fixes, and then come back and redraw all these waveforms. So now I don't have to do that. RX Connects eliminates that step. So aside from the functionality of RX standalone and being able to remove more and being a lot less invasive about it, ultimately it's that alone saves time. What used to be, say, a 40, 50-hour restoration job is now a 20-hour job. So half the time, more than half the time in most cases. And then, of course, when I'm doing my final QC, which we were seeing in that purple track in Pro Tools, I could then, with RX4 Connect, instead of having to make those captures and bounce back, which again takes up time where you're closing one program, opening another program, having to make these fixes, rely on your memory to remember what were footsteps, what were not. Now I'm always in Pro Tools. I just make the fixes. RX is always open next to it, and it's much faster. So that's going to save me even a few more hours on the back end. So what became a 20 to 24-hour restoration for something like we were just looking at, maybe 30 hours. I can't remember what my budget was exactly. Let's say 25 to 30 hours. I'm expecting with RX4 to eliminate another 2 or 3 hours of that time just by the fact that I won't have to bounce around so much or go back and forth or second guess myself, because it's going to be there right in front of me all at once, and that's a huge time saver. And plus, it's efficient, which to me, efficiency is key. You know, when you're making a living at this, people expect it to be done right and on time. And if you're sitting there doinking around with mouse buttons, for example, I use that example a lot because I hate having to click with my mouse everywhere I go. You know, it's tedious and time consuming. It makes it not fun too. You saw when I was in the spectral repair of RX, it looked kind of daunting, but once you get to know the spectral window, it's kind of fun. I like to sing to myself Sesame Street songs like, which one of these things is not like the other, and kind of choose my pops. But you start developing a flow for it and really realizing how much faster you get at doing these things once you're just comfortable with the way things look in the window. Oh, by the way, let me go to RX real quick because there's one other cool, very important feature that's just in the program that will make it easier for, especially for people who are starting off. So I still have my footsteps here. On this bottom here, I have a bar. So I'm looking at a spectrogram, but we could choose to put in the waveform too. So for people who are not really keen on using the spectrogram, you could overlay. Whoa! Here we go. That's what I'm looking for. There we go, zoom up a little bit. You could actually overlay the two. So for practice, while you're learning, you could literally see what you're seeing as you're used to with the waveform and not just the spectral repair. At this point, I just keep it turned off because I don't need to see it. You know, I've been seeing it for so long. But that's a very important tool because, especially as you're beginning, it's good for reference. Say, I'm actually going to go back and choose a different spot in Pro Tools where I'm going to see a little bit more. So
yeah, that's definitely cool. I could absolutely see how it could be daunting looking at the spectrograph by having the waveform there.
So I'm going to choose
across.
Exactly, and I'm going to choose a bigger section here. Open up my Connect module again because I closed it inadvertently. Send that. Now I'm sending this section to RX, and I want to just to give you a better idea because that section was so quiet I was showing you before. So now this has got more stuff in it. Those are their crazy, scary sound effects. Okay, so it's really scary, but you can see there's other stuff going on here, and by looking at it, you might not be able to tell. So when I turn on the waveform, now my waveform looks just like it does in Pro Tools. So if I hear a pop here, and I'm familiar with this here, I can zoom in and go, okay, this is where my pop is. I know where I'm at now. Go back to here and make a more accurate fix because now I could do it within time and frequency and then make my fix, and I just use the waveform essentially as reference. Which is useful. And again, they overlay each other. So it's a little dial that I can toggle back and forth all day long.
in
No,
RX4?
that's a feature that's been there all the way along.
Okay.
RX4 has some new modules on the left, on the right here. Now I've got the advanced version,
Right.
the regular version, which is a steal. They sell it for like I think 350 or 399. It's a
Hmm.
steal. It doesn't include some of these things like EQ match, ambience match, but it has all these core modules. It doesn't
Right.
have de-reverb, but spectral repair, de-click, de-hum, de-noise. It's got all of those. And really, when you're repairing stuff, those are the ones you're going to use.
Right.
I've used EQ match for certain things. It's kind of fun, but it's a little bit more advanced for a user, an advanced user. So I would say that if you're looking to get the advanced and you're not sure why you would get the advanced, if you're a power user and you love, or love is not the right word. um, if you're looking to really get in there like I did, the price I think is $1,200 or $1,299 for the advanced, and even at that price point for what you get, just to give you an idea, CubeTech, which is really high end, kind of like Cedar, really high end plugins. Even Cedar, a plugin module for Cedar or CubeTech alone is going to cost you $1,200 for one module, one plugin.
Huh.
This, for $12.99, you get the entire advanced suite with everything, including the plugins for Pro Tools, which, by the way, I'm running Pro Tools 10, so I'm using the RTAS versions. They have the AAX versions for Pro Tools 11, so it's all completely compatible with the updated versions. I mean, it's pretty amazing, I have to say that. Again, from where they've come from RX4 from RX1 to RX4 is night and day, but in terms of just the overall experience, in terms of repair work and stuff, really Spectral Repair is where everything is heading. Everyone wants things fast, and they want
Right.
it now. And to be able to do things not invasively. Incidentally, you mentioned Steamboat Willie. When Disney came to me with their original 1928 negative cartoon, this is a soundtrack negative from 1928. I was using CubeTech at the time, but it was a Spectral Repair. It was one of the first Spectral Repair. So without Spectral Repair, that would have been impossible. It literally, for the 30 seconds that I worked on, it took me probably 2 weeks because I separated the effects for them. And I was able to do that because, again, with Spectral Repair, literally going below Mickey Mouse's whistling during the cartoon,
Yep.
going below his whistle, removing the steamboat. It was a ratchet or something they used for the sound effect. Remove that from it, remove all this stuff around the whistle, and then reincorporate harmonics back in so it sounded naturally. So the ability to do that was only I was only able to do that because of Spectral Repair, and it's time consuming and daunting for things like that. But for the most part, if you're doing production dialogue and say someone knocks on the door and you're going, oh my God, my recording's ruined. Well, it's not. Now I could remove the door and not have to remove that dialogue. In most cases, it's very successful, especially if you're going to mix it anyways where you might not notice a little bit of an EQ shift. It's even more forgiving. Now for restoration, I want it to be as seamless as possible, so I'm going for, like, if it's not good, I'm not going to correct it. It's better to leave alone than to make it worse.
Right. So this is something that somebody who's producing whatever it may be, if they've got some junk in the background, and I know this is kind of on an elemental side, but you can take tracks that before would not be usable. Now you can fly them into this program, and you can pull it all out, make it sound like it was never there, sound professional, and it doesn't take that much time.
Well, yeah. In fact, I have another great example of just that. And in fact, in this program, let me find some dialogue here. There's a lot of dialogue that's overblown and overmodulated.
Where would an 8-year-old kid get a gun?
Like that, for example. That's not a really good example. Let me find a better example.
And your moon is Sagittarius.
There we go. There's a nice little funk in there. So
Sagittarius.
you can hear the distortion in the voice, right?
Sagittarius.
So that kind of fix was virtually impossible to fix before Spectral Repair. So now I could take that section, I send it to RX, I choose my right screenshot so everyone can see. So here's that piece now.
Sagittarius.
So you can see the distortions around here. I'm going to turn off that waveform view. Whoops, wrong way. So that I don't see it. So now, if I zoom down, you can literally see, I mean, I see it better, I'm sure, but you can see there's a lot of cross garbage in here. The dark red is the voice, Sagittarius, and then I have all this other stuff down here, and there's it's kind of cloudy in here and cloudy in here. Well, that's that scratch that we're hearing, right? So I could take that now, and there's a lot of low-end noise in there. Let's say I can't remove this scratch, which I have to tell you, based on what I'm seeing here, I probably won't be able to remove the whole thing. But you can see I just did a replace repair with spectral repair. Scratch is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty spectacular. Now, the other thing that I could do, which is which I thought I was going to have to do, in this case it actually worked better than I thought it would, is gain reduction. So let's say this scratch is really annoying me and I cannot interpolate it out by using spectral repair. We have a gain module here. Where'd it go? Oh my God, I asked for this. I'm like, this is like the most gain, believe it or not, gain. Gain is something that's been around since sound has been around. But what this allows me to do is, if I can't repair it, I can reduce it so you can't hear it. So I can literally take that, I could process my gain. I'm going down 2 dB increments. I could go down a lot further, but for this kind of thing, you don't want to leave a hole. You want to leave it seamless. Mm-hmm. So if I can remember my key for it. So you can see here how the gain is being reduced, and I'm not leaving a hole. If I keep going, eventually it's going to get really black. Now that's a hole. I don't want to do that. But I can reduce the gain to essentially get rid of that, the beefy part of that scratch. Mm-hmm. Let me undo it to show you what it was before here. And this is with a little bit of gain control. So it's virtually gone. There's a little bit under the voice, but it's virtually gone, all by using gain. Now, where this is really cool is when you come across sibilance. Now, sibilance in the past, S's, people would use de-essers, and the problem with de-essers is that they're frequency dependent. So you can only do certain frequencies, and what I've discovered in my journeys here is that a lot of times hardcore instances of sibilance are not doesn't have anything to do with things in the frequency range of S's. Let's take this really loud, now obnoxious thing, whatever it is, for example. It's super modulated, super peaky, and there's just like it's really kind of nasty. Now before that we would note that and say we can't fix that, or we'd try and fix around it and maybe help it, but usually what we would do is make things worse. Mm-hmm. Now I can, by using that gain reduction, here's that section here. Close this for a second. So now using gain reduction, you can see this bright purple here, which is super loud and ear-piercingly tinny stuff. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Now I could use gain reduction and literally lower the volume of the offending frequencies. So those real harsh S's, things like this. Let me get to the full shot again here. Oops. I could, if it's too loud or sounds too loud, instead of reducing, I could reduce the gain of the whole thing. So I'm being kind of global about it, but you can see how much that would help, because now what used to sound really, it still sounds a little bit awful, but now I'm just using this gain reduction. I'm not even using spectral repair at all. I'm just lowering some of the offenders. And you can hear how much less abrasive it is. Now for sibilance, again, we went from de-essers to multiband compression, which we could be a little bit more precise with, which of course compression isn't removing, it's just masking. So now I could reduce the gain, so I got this real harsh sibilant S, which happens a lot in foreign language tracks. Latin American Spanish is notorious for it. Stuff that we wouldn't be able to reduce. Now I could go in and literally reduce the frequency of those S regions that are causing the problems, and make it less harsh to listen to. Now, very time-consuming ordeal to have to go in there and every time you hear a plosive syllable to reduce it, but it's possible. So I've had people come to me and say, hey, this has been restored, but it's still very sibilant. I don't know what to do. Can you do something with it? And I say, okay, I can. Here's what I can do. This is how long it's going to take, but what you're going to end up with is a track that's going to be 80% better in terms of listenability than it was before, because you're not always wincing from the fact that you have all these really high frequency annoying pitches that are just drilling into your head. So that's another cool thing. Now that's been in RX for a long time as well.
Right. So bottom line is that if you're a professional um, then this tool here you feel is absolutely something that's going to save, not just you time, but it's the client, and time is money. So you
Yeah.
either will be able to bid out projects at a better rate, and finish them at a better rate, and at the end of the day probably get more calls because you're more competitive because you're operating at a much higher efficient level.
Correct. Correct. And like I said, with a little bit of practice, you get much more efficient.
Right.
But ultimately, the tools, I mean, let's face it, computers have come a long way in 10
Yep.
years, and the tools are such that they've just gotten better.
Yep.
And Izotope's done an amazing job in really giving people what they want. In fact, they're great people to talk to. They're really interested in hearing what people have to say. And I have to tell you that I've been doing post-production now for 17 plus years, and ultimately, I've seen Izotope kind of take over the realm where a lot of other programs used to reside, like No Noise, where they've stopped being developed. They haven't been developed in 5 or 6 years, which of course means that you can't use them except on an old TDM Pro Tools system because they're not RTAS, they're not AAX, they're old TDM plugins, so they're obsolete. And so virtually every editor I work with now, every mixer I work with now, all of them have some version of RX. And the only one that they don't use, the only version that they don't use, or they go, I can't use this, is version 1.
Okay.
Which honestly, it was funny because I've actually talked to some mixers and they go, I said, have you tried RX? And they say, no, I can't get it to work right. Now I'll see what they have, and they have version 1.
Huh.
So RX Izotope kind of bit themselves in the foot a little bit. But since 2, 3, and 4 have come out, it's been such a night and day difference between all those versions that at this point everyone has it. In fact, I don't know of very many people who are working in the business who aren't at least familiar with some of the operations to be able to do at least small fixes so that when they're mixing, they're not wasting their time either sending it to an editor, sending it to someone like me. They could just do it themselves right there. It'll take less than 5 minutes, and again, saving a lot of time because they're not having to then outsource something like that, which, to be honest, I make money that way. I wish they would. But I also love technology, and for me, these technology being affordable and work really well has enabled me to sit here like I am with my artwork behind me and have my own studio and really become very professional in my own private studio and without having to spend $20,000-$30,000 to compete with the large factories that have the money to put out there. So, I mean, for $1,300, the RX Advanced for me is everything. Between RX and I use one other plugin, an EQ plugin that I love, made by McDSP. RX is pretty much open all the time. I have it open. I use it all the time, and I don't just do restoration work. I also am an effects editor and a dialogue editor. So getting out clicks and ticks and pops when you're trying to get production dialogue ready for the stage is crucial. I mean, I have shown some dialogue editors that have been doing this forever, and they've been editing and editing and editing, and they have all these cool tricks to edit, and I do all those tricks too. But when they see some of the stuff that this thing can do now, particularly in RX4 where you're not having to again switch or wait for a plugin that's particularly slow, it's really going to save them a lot of time and make things much better for them because the learning curve isn't that steep where someone can jump into it and really start making fixes right away. Or if they keep doing it, they can get like me where they can start toggling a lot of the faders and really start dialing things in and making things really a lot better with very minimal effort. At this point now, I have presets, so when I'm working, I don't even start from the beginning. I have a preset that I call up in my decrackler or my declicker, so it's always ready for me. So when I know I'm not going to cause artifacting based on its settings, and if I do, it's a simple adjustment. I could go connect into RX. I could do it there if it works better, which a lot of times it will, versus staying in Pro Tools. But ultimately, I find it to be crucial, and I say that again not as just a restoration engineer, where obviously it's useful, but also as a mixer, as an editor, and someone who does first run stuff where you have all kinds of problems and you just don't have time to sit there. Another cool module in the advanced is they have a dialogue denoiser, which is amazing. And earlier this year, I did a couple of shows for Ion for award season. They were Oscar specials, and there were a couple of shots where the hosts were in front of a fountain and there was traffic, and it was just too noisy. And a lot of people don't really know that when we make movies, we literally take everything apart and reconstruct it without the distraction of noise and all that stuff. So things are replaced. So what I did is they're in front of the fountain at the Beverly Hilton or something like that. So it's a very famous scene. But it was just too noisy. So I used this dialogue denoiser, real time. It was just bam, there it was. It worked great. Now the fountain was gone, so I put in a fountain effect and I reincorporated the effect back in to give it that the sort of the realisticness of it, which is kind of odd that we would always deconstruct things and add fake things to make it sound real, but that's what we do. And just by doing that, and again, it took me 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, to apply the plugin, to set it up, apply it for these particular sections that I had noise issues with, and it was gone, and it mixed perfectly. I also did the mix for that one. It aired on Ion, and from all people, all the feedback I heard from, no one would ever have noticed it. I heard a little bit of artifacting in it, but again, that was before I mixed it. When I was mixing it, there was going to be music underneath it. There's going to be the fountain in the background. So all that stuff gets covered by the other stuff going on. So there's a little bit of leadway as far as that goes. But I mean, they're fantastic. They have a de-reverb too, which is mind blowing. It's like reverb. How do you remove reverb? But they do it, and it's not. To be honest, it's one of those things that is very touchy, and you could do it really wrong. But when you're making a production dialogue stem to mix, and they want it cleaned up, and it gives them the mixer the option of adding reverb as they see fit, it's crucial. It's easy to use. So it's really just a useful tool for everybody who's in the business. Music people too, record scratches, digital hits, anything like that they might have in music. Let's say they want to reduce a snare that they don't like and add a patch to it. Like I showed you with the gain, you could go in and do that with the gain, and then add your patch on top of it in Pro Tools, and you're golden. So there's a lot of uses for it, and it's just one of those things that I have found so useful to me that I wanted to get involved with Izotope, and so I said, hey, I use this all the time. This is what I want to have to make it better. How, can we incorporate these things? And I was all talking about the plugin, and they said, how about if we make it so that you can use both at once?
Huh. So basically, you came to them as a professional and approached them and said, hey, now did you ask them to beta test, or did they ask you to beta test?
I asked them to beta test, but I was already, that was way after the fact that I was, after I gave them my list of things I want to see in the new version.
Right.
Beta
so
testing
you don't work
is tricky.
for them, right?
No, I don't work for them at all. In fact, beta testing is tricky because I asked them to beta test, and then after I did, I thought to myself, wait a second. I don't have the time to work on stability, which is typically a problem with beta testing, is you're stuck using versions that just don't work. I don't have that time. I need something to work for me. So I got into the beta testing towards the latter part of it when it was pretty much stable, because
cool.
I didn't want to get into a situation where I was cutting off my own foot just to try and make their program better. I just need their program to work, you know. So professionally speaking, I called them and I said, hey, and they were really open about it. They had a conference call with them and their developers and said, these are things we'd like to see. They talked to other people, they told me. And with the RX4 Connect, they really incorporated a lot of it just by making the obvious doable, which was using the Connect screen and making it so that RX can run simultaneously, because now all the stuff that I asked for, most of it, not all of it, is already in the standalone, and now I could use it at the same time, which again is a time saver. It's more versatile. I could do more. I could save more audio by having just these other options available to me just within that program. It's really cool. I really like it. As you could tell, I'm really like a big fan of what they've been able to do over the course of, I think, 8 years or 9 years since they've been doing RX.
Sure. Well, why don't we do this? I know there's people out there that they're wondering about different things. You've mentioned a number of times about the learning curve and kind of playing with it and practice makes perfect. What would you say would be, let's address the people who are beginners, and then let's address the people who are very advanced. Could you take us through and show us a tutorial on, start maybe with something a beginner definitely should know and maybe practice, and then we'll go back and address what the professional should address?
Sure. Okay, let me go back into the standalone again. We'll leave Pro Tools alone for a while. Now we see the cool things that connect them. So this is, I'm going to close this and open up a file.
Okay, so this is what people see when they first come in?
So when they launch RX, this is what they're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to see this. They're going to just see this screen here. Now, I don't think you can see my menu bar because I'm. Can you see the menu bar on Izotope? I don't know. If
No.
it's in the screenshot. Okay, that's okay. Excuse me. There's different things. So I'm going to open up a file. Just Command O on a Mac. I'm sure it's Control O on a PC. Just like everything else you would ever open.
Right.
I have a list of files here. I'm just going to open a fairly long one that I know is fairly long. Let's say. That one. Here we go. That's not that long at all. No. What am I looking at? Was I looking at the K's instead of the G's? Yeah, that sure is what I was looking at. There we go. Okay, so I'm opening up a file, and this is what comes up off the bat. You'll see the tab up top. I can have now, and this is something that happened with 3, and of course carries over to version 4. I can actually have multiple files open, multiple tabs open across the top, which is helpful for certain things. So you have a EQ you're trying to match. It's great to have things to compare them to. So I have my, of course, my what do they call this? The universe view. And then I have my cursor. Along here, like I said before, we have our frequency scale, our time scale across the bottom, our color graph. Again, the more red it is, the louder it is. The more blue it is, the softer it is. So right off the bat, for a beginner user, I would say there's a couple of things. Incidentally, this shows up in the middle like this. This is your settings. Let me actually show you real settings. I'm going to go back to this window in a minute, but I want to show you what you're actually looking at when you get it from the company, because this is what you get. No color or anything. You just get this, which is another thing that drives me crazy, because if you could have full color, why would you choose orange? Some people can't see full color. Some people like the numbness of the screens. I actually have gotten used to the color because it's more useful. Whereas this, I can only go white to orange in terms of loudness.
Right.
So right off the bat, I would tell beginners that the easiest way to look at things is to change the way this looks. Now, there's a couple of ways to access that. You don't see my my menu, but if I go into the preferences, which I'll bring over here, which is under the file menu. Yeah, I have all these kinds of things. So I'm going to go to display real quick. I'm going to start there because that's where we would change. Actually, that's not where. I'm sorry. I'm wrong here. Let's close that for a second. So, oh, here, it's in the view menu. In the view menu, we have something called spectrogram settings, which is this setting. Or you could right-click on the window or control-click. It depends on everyone's preferences. I generally have my mouse set up to right-click on a Mac because it's easier for me. So right off the bat, I have the color map here. I'm going to change that to multicolor 2, which to me is what I'm used to working with. This is what I used in CubeTech. This is how they did it, and you can see now you've got the spectrogram of the colors, which makes it much easier to see things. I'm also going to change the scale of what we're seeing. Right now we have it set to Han, which is just basically like a FFT scale, where everything's sort of linear across the frequencies. So I have 10, 20, 50, 100. It's all very linear. I'm going to change that to log. Where is it? I'm in the wrong. No, that's right. Where's logarithm? Am I passing it? Is it gone? Okay, so I'm on the wrong thing. No wonder. Okay, that's not. Okay, so sorry about this. I was in the wrong windows. That's the window. Here we go. Frequency scale. That's what I was looking at. So it's normally set to linear or mel. linear right, and you can see that I lose the low end because it's now functioning linear. So I changed this to logarithmic because really a lot of the low end is more important than all this junk on the high end, which is generally non-existent above, say, 15K. Here, in this case, it's above 8K, it's gone, and that's typical with films, especially optical film. So I'm changing that to logarithmic. I'm changing this to multicolor too, right off the bat, because to me, this makes it easier to use.
And that's done in the view window?
So yeah, in the spectral view. So I could either right-click like this and go into view spectrum settings. There's a key command for it, or it's in the it looks like it's in the view menu of Izotope RX4.
Okay, and we just can't see it because of the screen share.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
So basically, so I changed the colors, right? Now I'm going to go back into, again, we can't see this, but in the file menu or the Izotope menu, there's preferences like all programs have. So here's another thing right off the bat. We have an audio tab, very important. Your output will be set to built-in, whatever your default is. Usually it's a built-in line output for your Mac. This uses core audio. So in my case, I wanted to go through my Pro Tools drivers, so it comes through my speakers. So I don't want to take that off core audio because I'm not actually using the Pro Tools hardware to drive it, but I'm going to change my output to reflect that. So in my line of outputs here, oh, that reminds me of one other thing I get back to, which is really cool about RX4, which I overlooked initially too. But here, I set my output to built-in digital output because I have my light pipe from my tower going into my Pro Tools hardware. That allows me to audition it. Because at first, if you don't hear anything, you're wondering if something's wrong. So channel routing is important too. So basically, setting up your I/O is, like everything else in audio, is something you need to start right off the bat. You could you could set a tone to make sure your channels are set up right. Generally, it's stereo. It doesn't open 5.1, which is fine. There's a lot of other considerations when you're interpolating multi-channels like that. But if this were a stereo track, you'd actually see a split screen with one version, the left on top and the right on bottom.
Okay.
Okay. And I could probably open one up so you can get a look at that too. Real quick. So I always tell beginners to look at the preferences, look through things, see where things are, because a lot of times mistakes are made or the obvious is overlooked because you're not paying attention to sort of what is in front of you and you don't know the program well. So here under keyboard, I have this. With this program, I could program any keys I want. And as I've stated a couple of times already, if you're not using quick keys to do this, then you need to rethink your modes because you need to. It makes everything faster. So off the bat, and this is for professionals and beginners, I created some quick keys so that when I want to, say, apply spectral repair, I can automatically do it with it. I think I have the number 5 for that particular thing. And you could choose whatever keys you want. I chose 5 because Command 5 opens up the window. I figured 5 was a natural thing that made similar sense.
Sure.
So you go through all these things, see what you're looking at. Your miscellaneous, your time code rate, which is crucial. Beginners often don't even know that exists in anything. It's very important that you're on the right frame rate because once you go back into Pro Tools or even in Pro Tools, you will be in a world of hurt if you've got to adjust things by 0.01% to make it go from 30 to 29.97. It's just not a good thing. Frame rate's awesomely important. You have your authorization and updates. They offer a free trial. Once you have it updated, just make sure that you're authorized and you're not still working on your free trial. The other thing you could do is you could also now enable your audio units and VST plugins within this window. So now I can use all my plugins, including my Pro Tools plugins, my McDSP plugins, my Waves plugins, all within this program. So you could add those here. I don't. Some people have their favorites. You could add those, but it's good to know. Honestly, I haven't gotten around to it. I'll probably eventually add them. I just don't use them because when I'm in here, I'm doing repair, and I go back into Pro Tools to do the real EQing and stuff.
Right.
So that's for beginners. The other thing that is really important is understanding what you're seeing. Again, we go back to sort of using the waveform toggles to get the visual of what you're seeing so that you could kind of get used to what the the spectral view looks like as compared to that waveform.
Mhm.
Remembering, of course, that the waveform doesn't have anything to do with the frequency scale. In fact, you can see it disappeared on me.
Right.
But if I go back, there's my frequency scale again, because now in the spectral repair frequency, I also tell beginners to trust their ears. A lot of times they're looking too hard for things. If you hear a high frequency tick, don't look down here. This is low frequency information. High frequencies are up higher. So if I hear a tick and it's high, I'm already looking up here. I'm not looking down here.
Right.
And I say that because when you're in a waveform, the tick you're going to see, like this one here, we're going to see no matter what. This tool is cool too because you can actually zoom up to the waveform. So I can see the tick no matter where I am. It's going to look the same. In spectral repair, however, it doesn't look the same. But you can see it's a high frequency tick right there. You can kind of see it a little bit. Let me see if I can adjust the. There you can see it a little better now, I think. Kind of right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could trust your ears as much as you trust your eyes. Then, after you've trusted your ears, trust your eyes, because, like I said, I could go all day. That's not what I want to do. And make interpolations all day long. But if I do something like this, that obviously looks bad, and that's going to sound like a little dropout, which is what it is now.
Right.
So if you do something like this, don't assume it's going to be okay. Listen to it, audition it, and try something else. Maybe 2 interpolations. In this case, I'm going to choose a pattern. I know this, but there's another thing to do is experiment with everything. Don't be stuck on doing things one way. And that's for advanced users too. A lot of times advanced users who are advanced mixers say don't ever really dive into this kind of stuff too much because they're not using it all the time. But if you ever were to dive into anything in spectral repair, learn what these do, because they work differently on different types of audio, and knowing what they do is going to save you a ton of time. Experimenting with them.
Brian, when you say know what these do, can you point out on the
Yes.
screen?
Sure. So I was going to finish my thought. Experimenting is crucial because there's no, even in the manual, it'll give you an idea, but it's not going to tell you exactly. So let me zoom out of this a little bit here. So basically, there's 4 tabs in this. We have attenuate, replace, pattern, and partials and noise. Attenuate isn't like an attenuation like a gain control, because all of these are interpolations. And if you're not familiar with what interpolation is what happens when basically it looks at the surrounding region. Say I highlight this section here. I'm going to desaturate that a little bit. You can see the big box drawing around it. It's going to use those regions to recalculate what this should be. That's what an interpolation does. Now, with the attenuate tab, it does that based on level. So it's going to try and match the level of the surrounding regions. So you're not just gaining something down like an attenuate would normally function, but you're actually going to reduce the level. So if I try, let's process that and see what happens. You see nothing really happened because all this other loud stuff is around it, right? So in this case, I find attenuate is not a good choice. So here we also have replace, which it will give you the same kind of box as attenuate. It's a little bit bigger, and those are all controllable down here. We have surrounding region lengths. You can see I could decrease and increase that box. That's going to tell it how much I want it to use. By default, it's at 100%. And it's going to look left to right. Now I have before and after weighting, which is going to let me look before or after to a greater or lesser extent. And that's important because if I'm sitting next to something dialogue-wise, let's say, or this sound, and I have this pop here, I don't want it to necessarily use this information to do the interpolation. I want it to use the spaces in between, so I'm just going to have it look to one side. Again, this is stuff to experiment with. It's a little bit advanced when you're beginning.
Right.
But so basically, I kind of didn't mean to lose that spot. It was a better spot. Let me see if I, here we go.
And Brian, real quick, I'm kind of thinking with the screen share. If you select a screen share that includes your desktop, then we might be able to see the drop.
Oh yeah, okay. Let's try that.
Yeah, give that a try.
Hi, I'm back.
He's back.
Let me move this over here. So there. Now you can see my isotope, right? The menu here.
Yeah, actually, yeah. There we see everything. See if you can zoom in a little bit.
Zoom in to where?
The picture, maybe like Command plus.
Thank you. I don't. No, we gotta get off that. Wait. Oh, come on. Stop being a pain in the neck.
and if that doesn't work, at least now we can see.
Yeah, that's not working. Yeah, that's not working at all. So.
All right. Well, at least now we can kind of see what you're clicking on.
I was showing you before. Here's the Izotope menu. The preferences are here. So we have all those tabs, and then the spectrogram is under the View menu.
Let's see. I think we're looking at Pro Tools.
Well, why are we looking at Pro Tools?
There we go. Yeah, you just have to drag that over. Perfect.
And you see the menu above there? Because my screens are a little bit different than yours then.
Let's see. Well, I just saw the box there, and then you just closed it.
No. Hold on, let me see what you're looking at. Oh, I see. I have the wrong monitor chosen. That's why. Here we go. Let's try this again.
How many monitors do you have, Brian?
I just have 2. Now I have an infinite array of stuff. Here we go. Now you see it good?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you see you should be able to see
there we go.
stuff
Yeah.
too.
Oh, perfect. That's great.
I have 2 monitors, and I use them both very actively.
Yes.
So I was showing you before. Here are those menus again. The preferences where we were. Here's the View menu, the spectrogram settings.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I encourage people to go into the Help menu, launch Help, which will give you the menu, the manual. Very important. Read it. People don't like reading manuals. If you're new at this, read the manual, because this will tell you.
Just had Brian drop off there, and just see if he's going to pop back in. So we're here with Brian San Marco, and he's doing a tutorial on the Izotope RX4, and was just kind of going into some of the screenshots, and unfortunately it dropped off, but we're going to see if he's going to be able to come back in. So as you can see, definitely was taking us from opening up a project and going in and saving the sound, restoring that sound, and just kind of showing us a little bit more fine-tuning. We're kind of getting into a little bit about how it should work for beginners, some things for them to work on, and we're going to get into a little bit of what the professional would be using to get their work done. So we're just seeing if Brian's going to pop back in here or not. Sometimes the calls get dropped due to bandwidth. And probably what we'll do here is we're going to invite Brian back in to another tutorial, just kind of finish up on that tutorial, and just go into a little bit more in depth. Please, definitely, you can tweet your questions to hashtag RX4Q. And what we do is we pull those up in Twitter, and then we can actually, see the questions that people are having, get those questions answered for you. You can ask the expert, Brian himself, and he can take you through and show you step by step as to how that works. So, with that said, I'm going to end the event here, the review of the RX4. And thanks for viewing in here. Thanks for your time, and we absolutely look forward to seeing you on subsequent shows that we're having. And one last thing I want to share with you: if you have not gotten your free listing on PostProduction.com yet, then do it. It's totally free. Just go to PostProduction.com, click the button up at the top that says free listing, and just fill it in. We'll vet that and post it up live. Hopefully that'll help you get found by people who are looking for anything having to do with post-production. So with that, make it a great day. We definitely look forward to seeing you on the next show, and we'll see you then.